You so much for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Ludwick, and I am honored to be your guide today on today's discussion on the crisis in Sudan. I have personally lived in Sudan and worked in Sudan years ago, and now I am honored to say that I am a board member of Lift Up the Vulnerable. Um, Sudan and South Sudan are very near and dear to my heart, which is why I'm here today to kind of bring awareness to this forgotten war. Before we get started, I want to address a couple of housekeeping requests. If you could, please keep yourself on mute during the conversation, but feel free to type questions in the comment section. As we have time at the end of our presentation, we'll answer as many questions as possible. But now the exciting part, let me introduce today's panelists. First is Noor. Noor is originally from Sudan, but she was born and raised in the US. She is a student at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, majoring in public health with a minor in psychology and political science. Growing up, she spent her summers in Sudan while her immediate family is here in the US. The rest of her family is still living in Sudan and living through this current crisis. Next up, we have Bryan Pride. Bryan is a seasoned food security consultant and founder of, I'm going to mispronounce it, CumPassio. Did I say it close? Sorry, Bryan, I apologize. Bryan prioritizes indigenous crop preservations while integrating nutrition and conservative agricultural training. With his master's in public policy, he has contributed to revising the USAID Global Food Security Strategy and other food security policies, emphasizing the inclusion of indigenous crops, agroecology, and nutrition. Next up is Ms. Audrey Moore. I think most of you on this recognize Audrey. Audrey is the CEO of Lift Up the Vulnerable, where since 2005, she has supported the foundation and expansion of the organization's indigenously directed anti-trafficking network that today spans in Sudan and South Sudan. She came face to face with the horrors of child trafficking when living in Europe, which has inspired her life's work. The next two people I would like to introduce are not speakers in the traditional sense. We'll hear about their experiences from them, but it'll be through a previously recorded clip. We wanted to incorporate lived experiences of individuals navigating the conflict area in Sudan. So first in our video broadcast will be Ezekiel. Ezekiel is the executive director of Our Father's Cleft in Sudan. Our Father's Cleft is a member of Lift Up the Vulnerable Anti-Trafficking Network to empower young children and women in conflict regions to rebuild their communities. In 2013, Ezekiel joined the staff as a Hope for South Sudan teacher and served in that position until 2015, when he became the Indigenous Director of Our Father's Cleft. The second one that will be joining us via video will be James. James is the founder and executive director of New Life Ministries. It is along the border of Darfur in South Sudan. Working alongside Love and Our Father's Cleft, in 2005, New Life Ministry became the founding member of Love's Anti-Trafficking Network. James was awarded the Tenenbaum Peacemaker Action Award in 2018 for his years of dedication to transforming lives in war zones. You may have noticed I didn't mention some of our speakers' last names, and this was done intentionally. We are not sharing the names of some of our Sudanese presenters when we feel like there may be a risk, and we won't be sharing any specific village names to protect our partners' work and their families. Now, before we get to hear from our amazing panelists, we are going to highlight some key events that have led to the current conflict in Sudan. The conflict in Sudan has deep historical roots, beginning with the era of colonialism in the late 19th century, when the British and Egyptian forces colonized the region. Establishing a system that marginalized various ethnic groups and set the stage for future divisions following the independence of 1956, Sudan experienced a series of leadership coups, each contributing to the instability that would plague the nation for decades. Omar al-Bashir came into power in 1989 through a military coup. He devised an innovative strategy called coup-proofing to keep himself in power. He created parallel military forces to weaken the loyalty of the traditional army and ensure that no military faction could challenge his authority. Civil wars, human rights abuses, and the infamous Darfur genocide marked his authoritarian regime. His rule lasted until 2019, when widespread protests led to his removal. The power vacuum created subsequently, struggled for control, particularly between two key military forces or figures. General Abdul Fattah al-Burhan, the head, phone coming off during the meeting. He is the head of the Sudanese Liberation Armed Forces, otherwise known as SAF. And then General Mohammed Hamid Delgado, commonly known as Hameti, is the leader of the Rapid Support Forces, otherwise known as RSF. Their rivalry reflects the ongoing tensions and complexities of Sudan's political landscape, as both leaders vie for dominance in the country still grappling with the legacies of colonialism, dictatorship, and civil strife. So that's a lot to consume. So now let's hear from Ezekiel, who lives in the Nuba Mountains of South Sudan and is the director of Our Father's Cleft, which protects children from human trafficking and oppression. In this video, I asked Ezekiel to introduce himself and discuss the current crisis, who's involved, and how is it affecting his community. I'm struggling to hear the volume.
Of Our Father's Cleft in Nuba Mountains. I am glad actually to be part of this interview, and my roles actually at Our Father's Cleft. I'm a leader here, and I lead orphan children, and I have more than 60 staff with me, helping in the farm and also taking care of children. Yeah, I need to actually in a very tough and terrible zone area of war, and yeah, but I'm glad to be among my people and the children, to be working, meeting the children and to help them in this very difficult time. Yeah, thank you so much. Sudan actually has been in many wars and non-stop wars, and it is like a routine wars that are happening, and it's a political war. Political civil war that has never been stopped since we were very young, and this is where we got it. And maybe my parents both they were born in war, and if we talk about the current war, it's actually started by two generals, that is Hamid and Burhan in Sudan, although they were together in the same system. In 2019, when the transition happened, they were together, and then later on they defected. I mean, they broke from each other in 2023. This is where actually the war got erupted in Sudan as a whole. So people were divided, both army, whatever called Sudan Revolution Front, and then also the South Sudan Army Forces. So they chopped into two, in which actually South the other party called the party called the Islamists. Most of the South are Islamists, and actually the main agenda of that is the changing of the ruling system to the civil, instead of military governance to civil. And when they failed to do that, this is where actually the war started in Sudan. So many people actually got affected and they fled from Sudan, and many others were killed. And even today, others can't find their own people in this war. So moving to Ethiopia, running away there with some of his family and many others. Some of them actually came to Kauda for their families, and others to Angorian, and we have the Western Jebel and Togo. Actually, they were near to Jau or to South Sudan, and they now situated there. And others are with their families. And that one actually, as we talk now, we have some few children whom we adopt, those who ran from Khartoum. We managed to get some few, although we could not get most of the children who actually who got affected in Sudan. Actually, we managed to get some few at our school, at our father's school. So, but many others are still hanging. And so it wasn't easy. It is a serious war, and it has affected the lives of our people, especially the people who are really got affected in Sudan by aerial bombardment, as the first thing, the town war, which is most even difficult than being in the bush. Maybe you can hide maybe behind a tree, but today it is really serious. It has affected them. That created actually trauma in the children and the women who have come. As they talk, you may feel it that these people are not you, and the mind is not in the place because of what they have seen.
Oh. Ezekiel and the people of his village have seen all sorts of things, and I was very thankful that he could share that with us. Next, let's hear from James. He lives in South Sudan along the border of Darfur, as you can see right there marked on the screen. He is the director of New Life Ministry, and he also leads the anti-trafficking work in his community. I asked James to introduce himself and to share what it's like in his village, since Darfur is just north of him.
Hi, I'm James Lualatak. I'm from South Sudan, and I'm the director of New Life Ministry and the founder of New Life Ministry also. And New Life Ministry is under the partnership of the Live Up the Vulnerable American Mission Organization in the United States. And we have been working together for quite very long times. And that is where I am at the moment. And we are located between the Sudan side and Darfur and South Sudan. That's where we base New Life Ministry. Actually, as I mentioned on my introduction, that we are bordering Darfur, Sudan, and between South Sudan and Darfur, and the main route to Sudan, capital Khartoum. We are the nearest. We are the gate points to South Sudan and to Sudan is less than a 1 hour drive to the border of South Sudan and Sudan. And what is happening at the moment, there is a conflict between Sudanese themselves, among Sudanese themselves, which is well known all over the world. And that conflict, it has caused also the situation in South Sudan where we are located at the high risk. There's a lot of militias in the area. There's a lot of the stability in the area. And then also there's a lot of refugees, who fled to my area at the moment. And in that situation, it made everything to be very complicated. The living wise of the community, also it become a very high risk. And there's a conflict between the South Sudanese and Sudanese refugees in the place, but at least there is a peace that been maintained among themselves, because there was a history of the war between Sudan and South Sudan many years ago, and South Sudanese have been in the war for many decades, for many generations. And that one, Sudan government, he has been using the people at the border to fight the people at the border of South Sudan. And that has been a major conflict since 1950s, since before 1950s. So at the moment, there is a lot of fear and a lot of risk of refugees flooded into my area. A lot of them, they are sitting under trees, they are sitting with no shelters, they have no medication, they have no food, they have no water. And also at the same time, we have the flood that we just came this year again, and everywhere is flooded. Many people are sick. Many people are facing so many difficulties, but mainly is the war issue between among Sudanese themselves that left so many people dead. And many people actually lost their homes, lost their family, lost their basic commodities of living on. And in that kind of situation, in my area, we are more affected than any other places in South Sudan. And that is the fact at the moment. The war which is happening in Sudan and is also part of South Sudan, and South Sudan also is not even stable. There's a lot of war every corner. In other day, the bus was ambushed in Nimli border. People were killed there, and the bus was banned. And also in my area, because of the refugees and insecurity and the fear because of the conflict at the border, it's really in big mess. We are overwhelming because of overpopulated. There's a lot of sickness. There's a lot of death, and there's a lot of outbreak of cholera and malaria and many other diseases. And in that situation, it was only Live Up the Vulnerable who actually sent the medical doctors sometime in the year, like last August, and we intervened, helping many other community and refugees at the same time. So what I'm saying here, the situation in my area, there's a very high fear, and there's a very high, a lot of issues in the term of the food shortage, in the term of the medical facilities. There's no hospital actually. There's no any good hospitals there. There's nothing. People are under tree. So that is the situation we are in right now. And it's like overwhelming because it's, the population who comes to my area is more than the population in my village at the moment.
James is such a powerful speaker. I always appreciate his insight on what he's going on and what he is seeing. Let's turn from James for a moment. Let's hear from Nora. Nora, can you tell us about your time in Sudan growing up and how the war has affected your family?
Yeah, so literally since I could remember, like a lot of my core memories were in Sudan. So we would spend usually 1 month or 2 months every summer, like at least up until middle school, and then it turned into like every other summer, but my whole family was there. And I guess like I would see families here and I would see family reunions and I would see everyone with their cousins and like it was something I really yearned for. So it was like the part of the year that we all looked forward to because in Sudan too, like that's where I learned all my morals, my values, my character. I learned that all from my family in Sudan and even just the culture. Like it's just something priceless about being in a place where like you belong. Like you feel like everyone cares about you and loves you. Um it's I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the experience and the opportunities that my parents gave us to go there because really I feel like that's what's kept me grounded. Every time throughout the year, it was like a refresh. Like I go there and I was just homesick. I wasn't sad. Yeah, but it was amazing. It was amazing and I miss those days. The other part of your question you said,
How, yeah,
how's
yeah,
the
how's the war affecting your family now?
So my family, they're all farmers. So like in terms of like food, they can sustain themselves to a certain degree. Obviously, it's a lot more difficult. They get all their resources and like their oil and their flour, which is so expensive these days. And the only reason they can't afford it is because they have us on the outside. But they get their resources from there. And it's a 2-hour drive. And it's like every time they drive, like they're risking their lives. My aunts don't leave the house. My girl cousins don't leave the house. And all the kids don't leave the house. Like my cousins haven't been to school in so long. It's just like, and as of lately, in the past like couple months, since the last time, like they just keep bombing around them. And it's the RSF that's doing it. They've gotten like some of my family, but like thank God, like most of them are okay. But they say like I was talking to my aunts the other day, and they say this is the pattern of the RSF. They'll like bomb around and leave and hide, so you don't know where it's coming from, and then come back, and they keep coming back. It's my aunt tells me that like she doesn't know how to sleep anymore because she's sleeping to the sounds of missiles. Like it's very dystopian. Makes every step feel heavier. And obviously there's survivor's guilt, of course, because like all my cousins are in school and here I am. Like I feel very blessed and fortunate and grateful, but I know their experience is something that I couldn't even imagine. But yeah, so they also have like goats and cows and chickens. So it's a really good thing that they are farmers, but everything has ceased. Like everything is dead right now. They don't have their jobs anymore. Like they don't have school anymore. Society just stopped and paused and it's not fair. But they're very hopeful. It's very inspiring to see their faith. When I talk to them, it's like I'll ask them how they're genuinely doing, and it's like they text me back and ask me about school, and I don't know how to answer that. They're so hopeful and they're so optimistic, and I think it's not even just optimistic in the sense that Sudan will become better one day. It's just optimism in the fact that like their faith in God has shown me, like has taught me things that I didn't even know it was possible to be that like faithful and that optimistic in those situations. They're teaching us new lessons every day. And they're strong people. They're so strong. And my family's the type to not want to leave their homes. Like that's my last name is Eltom. Like Eltom lived there. So it's like they're not leaving. And also they can't leave. There's no visas being given anywhere and Egypt is closed, and if it's not closed it's 3,000 per person, but the whole village is my family and it's only my dad out here. So it's like it's not sustainable either because like once they leave then what? Like that's what they're telling us because ask my aunts all the time like, oh, why like can we get you guys to go somewhere like, and they don't even want to. And it's not to say that they're content like in their situation or they're not scared. They are. They're terrified. But they're the type they'll die on their lands. There's pride. We have pride. We have pride in our home. And I don't even live there and I have pride. Like it it seeps into me, their attitude. So they're very grateful, which teaches us a lot again. But they're doing good, and I am still in contact with them. I get really scared every time they don't answer. My mind goes to the worst places, but they're good. Thank God, they're good. All glory be to Him. Thank God.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for lending your voice to this and to them so people can know what's going on, and hopefully together we can all come up with a way to end this.
Hopefully.
Let's turn to James for a moment and listen as he shares insights on how the current conflict is similar to the wars in the past in Sudan. James was one of the Lost Boys, a former child soldier who was forced to fight in war between North and South Sudan in the late 1980s into the early 1990s. His perspective comes from lived experience on how the war displaces families and puts vulnerable children at risk of exploitation.
It really remind me a lot because of what I went through before, as I was explaining before. Even in our ministry clinic, we have treated the people that who have been shot from the Sudan crisis war to South Sudan, to my village, to where we are operating New Life Ministry. We have treated many other patients who got shot and they ran out with a bullet to my area. So this one, it reminds me and is really hurt me a lot because the situation we went through before and the situation we are going through right now and the situation many others from the Sudan are facing at Darfur side is really reminding me and is the worst and is getting worse because it's a genocide. And remember, Darfur, there was genocide was committed before. And the same person actually, which is fighting the government of Sudan, a rebel support forces, he was the one among the people who was indicted by international community, by international court, ICC, that he has committed genocide. And he's still the same person at the moment with this group, fighting the government and fighting everybody, including the South Sudanese. He found around, he shoot all of them, and he killed all of them, displaced them, destructing, burning down the homes, and all those guys. The one leading that one is one of the generals that the Bashir himself, he has equipped those days, and he put him at the border, and he's the same person who was actually mobilizing the army, who came to a village to burn the homes down, to burn the people in the churches, to burn the property like the food store, people as where they keep their food in the store in the village, So takes the children for slavery, for sex slavery, for the workers in the area. This is the man actually who was equipped by Bashir and given a lot of resources to be at the border and to destabilize our area next to Darfur. This is the general called, is called Amete. Amete is the one who has his group, is the one who has the army, is the one who got all the support from the Arab world, from Iran, from Iraq, from from many other countries in the Arab world. And this is the same person who was destabilizing us, who flushed us out from our home those days, who killed our people, our relatives, our family. It's the same person who is killing the Darfurian and who was the same person actually who was equipped by Sudan Army and Bashir, the regime, to commit genocide in Darfur. It's the same person at the moment.
He always gets me when I hear him speak. Next, let's hear from Audrey, the CEO of Lift Up the Vulnerable. Audrey, can you expand on some of the historical and humanitarian impacts your team has witnessed over the years? How has the war affected the civilian population in Sudan, and what are the most pressing humanitarian needs?
Thanks, Jennifer. So as many of you know, Lift Up the Vulnerable is on a mission to prevent human trafficking and oppression in war zones. So we go specifically where children and women are the most vulnerable, and there's little to no other help available because it's either too remote or too dangerous or too expensive for most organizations to work. And the way that we work is by building up individuals and communities through our indigenously based and directed anti-trafficking network that spans both of these nations. So through James and Ezekiel's programs, plus a third location closer to the border of Uganda, we're providing protection, education, and economic development to help individuals become change makers in their own lives, and ultimately the end goal is in their nations. So when we first started working in Sudan in 2005, it was during the height of Darfur genocide, and James was just naming the conflict is so similar to what was happening when we first began working with him. The founding member of our anti-trafficking network was James and his mission at New Life Ministry. His region had been particularly vulnerable due to the proximity to Darfur, to the raids by the Janjaweed, which literally meant devil came on horseback. And today, the Janjaweed is now known as the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. So you're going to keep on hearing the RSF throughout this evening as they talk about the conflict, because the RSF really is in the majority of control of the nation of Sudan. They're under the same leadership, but a different name. The image that you're seeing right now are drawings from 2006 from children in our program who had experienced the same or similar violence that's taking place like today. And during my visit that year, we learned that there wasn't a single family in James's entire village that didn't know someone that was killed or trafficked during the war. And at that time, Sudan and South Sudan had been engaged in the longest civil war on the African continent, which was nearly 5 decades. And in conflict zones like these, children and women just have nowhere else to go for help and are at greater risk of being exploited through sex trafficking, domestic servitude, labor trafficking, forced childhood marriages, and as child soldiers. Noor mentioned it earlier that, you know, the women and the children in her family are staying put because the risks for them are so much greater, though the risks for all are quite great. And exploitation is especially prevalent due to the extreme poverty in these nations, which is intensified again by rampant orphanhood, civil unrest, religious persecution, ethnic persecution, lack of access to education, lack of access to medical care, and even lack of access to food and clean water. So over the past 20 years, conflict has really continued to shape and shift in both countries. However, since last April 2023, Sudan has become home to the largest and most dangerous humanitarian emergency, far outpacing every other crisis in the world. And as we all know, there are a lot of crises in the world right now. There's extreme violence, which has gutted the capital of Khartoum. Countless towns and villages are being destroyed or have been destroyed. Many farmers cannot work, the economy has disintegrated, and prices of basic goods are really skyrocketing. Most schools are closed. The RSF, or the Rapid Support Forces, is targeting ethnic African minorities for extermination. And the SAF, or the Sudanese Armed Forces, is blocking aid access to large areas of the country. And war crimes are being committed on a large scale by both sides. So there's no good guy in this scenario. It's critical, I think, and I'm going to share some links with you in a moment, to understand that this war has never been about just 2 military leaders fighting. Nationally, the war in both countries is very political, but also very resource driven. Sudan became Africa's third largest gold producer in 2022 and has significant reserves of oil, gold, and various minerals. But countries like Russia and the United Arab Emirates exploit these resources and the people who work there in the mines, with an estimated of 80% of gold smuggled abroad. And the gold that's being smuggled is fueling other conflicts like the war in Ukraine and perpetuating the war in the nation. There was a recent report by the New York Times showing that the United Arab Emirates is fueling both sides of the war to help perpetuate it so that they can exploit the country for its gold. So it's never going to be about just two tribes fighting or just two generals that don't have a moral compass. This is bigger, and that's why it's so much more complicated to find a solution, a long-term solution. But long-term solutions do exist. Sudan, where the military dominates the economy, there have been decades of war that are linked more to geopolitics and resource exploitation than the convenient excuses of they're never going to figure it out. It's a country that's always going to be at war. So as always, this has devastating results for the people of both countries. Nearly 13 million people have been forced to flee their homes or have left Sudan altogether. Nearly 26 million Sudanese, half of the entire country, are facing high levels of acute food insecurity, and over 70% of Sudan's healthcare system has collapsed. Preventable disease outbreaks are becoming common, and over 19 million children of school age are not in schools because they don't have a classroom to attend. Thankfully, our programs in Sudan and along the border have not been stopped by the violence. But as you have heard and will hear, huge numbers of internally displaced peoples are now trying to resettle in the regions where James and Ezekiel live. And at last count, Ezekiel shared that over 500,000 people fled to his community, which has already resource restricted and strained. So now access to resources and inflation rates again makes survival hard, extremely hard. For already hard-pressed people, the war is really crippling communities.
Thank you, Audrey, for framing that for us and kind of explaining how severe this crisis is right now. Let's return to Ezekiel for a moment and listen as he shares how the Jesuit, also known as the RSF, Rapid Support Forces, are affecting the region and his family in particular.
In fact, right from the beginning of the war, the general, the militia guy, called Janjaweed, from the beginning, actually is a Janjaweed, who has been fighting in Darfur. He's being actually armed, well armed, and the reason behind of engaging the guy into the system of Sudan, in the army of Sudan, it is to get rid of all other states, like the other movements, like the SPLM, and also the movements in Darfur. So al-Bashir was using actually to accomplish for him the work. That's why when he was well armed. And when he detected from the current military council governance, and he became alone, he actually broke out with all the arms. So he was advancing, and even last month he was actually taking 70, more than 80. Was actually announcing more than 80. But initially, we can tell the reality. He advanced actually 75%. Most of the areas or other states in Sudan was dominated by them. So, and the army was actually going down and down, and that's the thing actually can tell, because there was no protection, nothing like peace. That people who have been running away, they're running away because they knew these are the agenda, and since they are taking over the roads, the police, and they are everything in the country. So the body is running actually away because it's not getting killed. Everybody who ran from the area actually feels that they have no army anymore from where they see and from where they inherit. Even my own family, Kenya, they said it is the RSF everywhere. Whoever interrogates us on the way is SRF. So they actually took 75% of the power in Sudan. But again, presently, that when I was when I was following 2 days ago, this is where the Elborhan got support, and they fought. They used the joint forces in Darfur for the other generals with him there. That is in Manawi and Jibril, the forces in Darfur. So they took the SRF unaware, and they were beaten actually. Although they did not capture every place, but some of them, they lost most of their ammunition. But this is for the first time since the war erupted. But that is still in Khartoum, that is still in Al Jazeera, and in most of the states of Sudan. And they were also in Al still bound. They moved from Al to Darfur still, so they're still there. So they're advancing, if I can say. They're still advancing. They haven't gone out of. And specifically also in Bahrain, that is the state in Khartoum, called Chergeni. This is where they're based now. And Al-Burhan has started actually using the aerial bombardment to spread them or to chase them away, but it's still affecting the people who could not run away. Because for you to move to a different state or to move for refuge, you need to have some money that can help you to get somewhere. But again, there is no communication. The internet cut off. People are using the Starlink. Again, if you don't have any source of income, you cannot get an access. If you have smartphone, is taken. You have everything is taken. So people are left that way. Unless if by chance you get somebody to connect you with your relative or someone you know, this is why you get help. The aerial bombardment that had happened recently has also affected the children and women and people around the village who are not even at SRF or who are not even involved in this war. So, they are really facing it hard. But God is the area of the conflict. Some of them are protected, and sometimes people take a look and they make destruction. They kill people, slaughter people. They do all this terrible stuff. They do things that you cannot imagine. That is inhuman. Now, people are suffering that way. Hunger, killing, and expelling people from their own places and all that. So people are living very, very miserable. As we talk now, it is not easy. It's not easy. You only trust God.
It's always so heartbreaking to hear what is going on right now. Right now, as we're sitting here in the comforts of our home, this is happening there. Switching gears a little bit, Bryan, you visited our Father's Cleft, where Ezekiel lives, to provide some training and technical support on their agricultural program. You've also stated before that war starts in the stomach. Can you share more about the project at our Father's Cleft? What is your perspective on traveling to the Nuba Mountains? How does hunger perpetuate war? And how does war perpetuate hunger?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Jennifer. I want to set context a little bit first. I first visited the Nuba Mountains in, I believe, February of 2022. And that was before the current fighting that's taking place actually broke out. And at that time when I was visiting, the biggest challenge that they were faced with was actually climate change. The fact that there wasn't a lot of rainfall in the area, and also the fact that farming was really challenging. Just to help everybody understand, the Nuba Mountains is in the southern part of Sudan, and it's a mountainous area. It's a very dry, rocky terrain, and you can actually see that here in the photo that's being shown. The traditional method of farming in that area is actually terrace farming, because once again, we're talking about a mountainous location. And so you could actually see people carrying large rocks on their head up these mountain hills, mountain slopes, in order to create terraces to prevent their crops from sliding down the hillsides when rain would take place. And so this is a very laborious type of farming, and it's also a very dangerous type of farming, but it was the only method that people could be using in order to actually get yields from their crops. With changes within climate, it's made these conditions even more challenging. And this is something that's happening throughout all of Sudan. Sudan has multiple different types of climatic zones, meaning different areas are being affected by it at greater rates. But so when I was going out there, it was to actually work with Ezekiel and his staff on how to actually have more conducive farming practices to increase their chances of having really good yields. One of the reasons why we thought it was an okay time for me to go out there is because there actually was peace at that time. And Ezekiel was talking about how the ultimate way to denote that peace was actually taking place was to have farming. Because as everyone has been mentioning, there are air raids, there are bombs that are dropped, and everything is destroyed, making it impossible to farm, which constantly reminds people that you're not at a state of peace. And so when you start thinking about it from that perspective, you understand how war actually perpetuates hunger, because war within itself is just destructive. The first thing that is lost in these raids into these villages is that farmland is the first thing to be burned. They attack the homes, they attack the livestock, they kill the livestock, they kill the crops, they burn the land, making it impossible to farm anything. And so you have this state where people have now been raided, every resource that they had has been taken from them, which now starts to commodify people, leading into trafficking. But we also see how it creates hunger. And that hunger also perpetuates war, because when the farmlands are destroyed and the communities are left with nothing, the hunger that you feel grows into desperation. You have no way to generate an income. We've heard about how prices of food go up in the market because scarcity is something that is now taking place due to that destruction. And when that desperation manifests, it swells into these minor conflicts among neighboring communities, or even leads to recruitment of trafficking or stealing from other communities and selling that for some type of means. And so we see how that war creates the hunger then perpetuates the war within itself. But what's also important to remember is that once upon a time, South Sudan and Sudan were one country. And the separation of Sudan into South Sudan and Sudan was actually also started by these same exact conflicts that we're talking about right now, where, Arab colonists were coming in and taking all of the resources out of what is now South Sudan, creating hunger in the pockets of South Sudan and shipping all of that food into the northern part of Sudan, or what is now Sudan. And so you see how one side of the country was being exploited because of this conflict that took place. And so the birth of South Sudan was actually also a rebellion of people fighting for their land, fighting for their resources, and trying to push back against this. But we've seen how there hasn't been stability past this. And so when I was able to work with Ezekiel at our Father's Clef, that's what we were hoping for. We were hoping that we could take advantage of the fact that there was actually a calmness at that time. We thought that we would be able to cultivate these crops. And the main thing that we focused on was adopting conservation agriculture techniques so that people could actually have a chance to withstand the climatic changes. Go ahead and hit the next photo for us, please, Ashton. Oops, sorry. And so what's important to understand in this is that even with that short period of time of being able to work with them, we were actually able to see really good yields in this staple crop here called sorghum, which is an indigenous crop in this area. And at this school, they've been able to use these climate smart techniques and start cultivating these indigenous crops. And they have about 66 acres that they've been able to cultivate, with about 60 to 70% of the staple crops needed for the students is actually being cultivated from this farm. So we're actually seeing that even though there's this time of conflict, those agriculture techniques have actually been able to provide for the students and also provide for community members in that area.
That's amazing. And I love seeing those crops and how much that bare land and what's there now. I mean, what an incredible project. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's hear from James again on what he believes can be done to help Sudan on an international level based on his experience of how peace came to South Sudan after 50 years of conflict.
Because when I went back, after being a lost boy and a child soldier, and I came here and I found the opportunity to go to the United States, and I returned back. And I did not settle in the United States because of that kind of the feeling that God has called me, and I have the vision is that we as a Christian around the world, we have to come to our senses of understanding and pray for one another and love one another and care for others who are actually vulnerable and they need help, and they become the a world forgotten people that a lot of destruction has been going on. And this kind of destruction is still continued. Even in South Sudan, it's still there. And what's in Sudan because of the war which is going on. And what I could see it could be done is that the people need help. And how do they need help is because when we feel ignored, or when I see that this war has been ignored, people don't talk about it. International community don't talk about it. The world don't talk about it, locally and internationally. And what we see is like the people from South Sudan don't want to talk about it. If they talk about it, actually into the higher level, is that there will be a fear that they will be caught in the middle here by these two groups, that they are taking one side, but they have been left to butcher themselves and cause also more problem to us. What I could tell that it could be done is that when the peace came to South Sudan, it was not by war, it was negotiation. It was sitting on the table, and people agreed, and people went for a referendum. Though even the current war in South Sudan in 2013, it was not solved by the war, by the gun bullet. It was solved by sitting on the table and people negotiate. I could appeal to the people that who could be having any power to bring the people together to sit and find the one-time solution settlement. That's another thing. Another thing also is that when the peace came to South Sudan for the first time in 2005, negotiation was carrying out in Nairobi as the peace agreement is starting negotiation. It was a Christian in the United States, for what I know very well. It was Christian leaders who marched to White House and told President Bush, people cannot be crucified here, and we are watching. People cannot be killed, and genocide has been committed, and we are watching. You must find the lasting solution. And that is how the George Bush Jr. signed, George W. Bush signed what is called Sudan Peace Act. That's how the peace came from. People have forgotten it around the world. People have forgotten it in South Sudan, and people have forgotten it in Sudan. So it was a negotiation that the George W. Bush, and the government of America and American people and the Christian leader in America said the solution must be found. To me, solution must be found to the suffering of the innocent children and women and people who have been raped and people who have been killed and people who have been abducted into the war to be forced to be the army, you know, when it is not their will. And it's happening as we speak. People that have been displaced, people are sitting on the tree, they are dying down under the trees, they are on the ground, nobody are tending to them. You know, to me, it's hurting a lot. When I see something like this, it's really hurt me. It breaks my heart. It breaks me in pieces. It really, it doesn't give me any energy to attend to this because there's no any way I could help. So though we have helped in the time of medical, we come in with the medical facilities with our volunteer doctors and help them, it still is uncontrollable. Situation is getting out of the hand, out of control. So I see that the Christian leaders, the Christian community should come together. People must pray for this. People must talk to the international community, to the leaders, to American leaders to find the solution. Again, the resources are needed. Resources to people like our institution, like the Live Up the Vulnerable. We need the resources that we can attend and we can support and we can care for those who have been affected heavily under trees, sitting on the ground, nothing. They've been rained on, mosquitoes, a lot of choleras, break out of so many diseases, and so on. Those are the things we could do if we have the resources. But lasting solution into the war is that the people who could take a stand to respond to this and bring the lasting peace in South Sudan or in Sudan is that to bring the people together for negotiation and not the conflict. And it cannot be solved by gun. It cannot be solved by gun. Because with a gun, nobody wins. It's just a losing. People are dying. People have been murdered. People have been chased out, been displaced. You know, that's the situation. Children, they have remained vulnerable. Thousands and millions of orphan children, they have been produced again, you know. So many widows, they have been left behind again with the conflicts that does not benefit the country. The conflict that has been created for the political gain, for people to find themselves in the power, for them to have that kind of the power, they have come in by force. It's through destruction they have done. And that one, it is not the solution for the conflict to continue and to be left people watching it worldwide. That's what I could say. And people also must rise up. The voices must be heard. People should come out and speak and say the truth, you know, about this conflict going on, that we don't want the conflict to continue and we need the peace as the lasting solution.
I love how he frames that it can't be solved with a gun. Peace will never be solved with a gun. During one of our extended conversations, which will be available to you, Ezekiel stated that he believed the two generals must step down and a new visionary leadership must lead the way. However, above all, if the system doesn't change at an ideological level, no long-term change will occur for this nation. Noor, what do you believe is needed to bring peace in Sudan? What do people in your family and village want to see happen next?
Like you were saying earlier just now, the two leaders need to step down. Like, there's no way the same RSF who kicked out my 90-year-old, 80-year-old grandparents and made them walk 2 hours to the next village over, those aren't our leaders. They can't be our leaders. That's not someone who leads. That's not anyone the citizens will be content with. I think accountability. I also don't think if Sudan did not have these outside countries involved, I don't think the war would have lasted this long, because where are they getting all their weapons from? Where are they getting these resources from to even supply this war? So accountability for sure. And I think also it's important, because I find myself struggling with this too, is like these statistics that we hear, these numbers that we hear, like that's like my aunt who lost her child, my cousins who haven't been to school, like there's a story behind it all, and I know it can be hard to conceptualize, but again, it's like we just have to remind ourselves that these numbers aren't just numbers. They're like our families, our parents, our siblings, my aunts, like, yeah, so accountability, and I think just whoever the next leader is needs to fear God, needs to truly fear God, because any God-fearing person doesn't do this. It doesn't do this to their people at that. Yeah, it's a conversation you can ask every Sudani person in the world. Everyone has a plan to fix Sudan. Like, this is an ongoing conversation at our dinner tables, and at times it can feel kind of hopeless, and it's hard to be optimistic. It's hard not to be pessimistic a lot of the times. But then I see my family and I see how strong their faith is, and just how even though they may not be rich in safety, they're rich in love, they're rich in faith and resilience. And I think reminding people too that Sudan is not just a country of struggle too. Like, there's a beautiful culture. These are people that are, like, I think humanizing these people can help with this conflict. I think the whole system needs to be scratched from bottom up. I think everyone needs to leave. Nobody who was in power in the past 20 years needs to be back in power. In Arabic, we say bahdalul dunya. Like, that means like they completely destroyed everything. Like, even when I went to Sudan, I went in 2020, which was right after the protests, and I remember like when we were leaving the airport, I'm seeing all this art on the walls, but it's like, and we were all so hopeful. I remember everyone, that was a time to celebrate. We thought a new age was coming for Sudan, like, but it's from the ground up. I remember every time I get sick in Sudan, which happens every time, like every 3 days. I'm not built for it. I still love it though. I'm not built for it. I remember last time I went, I got E. coli, and I need to drive 2 hours to, my dad said what was a hospital. Why did I get there? And it looks like my grandpa's house made out of mud, and he has a little drawer of IV bags. Like, the structure is just broken. It's broken, and it's not sustainable, and it's not even before this, but like with this war now, it feels like the hole has been dug so deep. But we can't lose faith, and we have to use our voices. We're responsible for it. Like, everyone here is responsible, because they're people and they're humans at the end of the day. And I know it can be neglected, maybe for multiple reasons. And I know it's hard not to get burnt out, especially with the state of the world right now. But they deserve our intention and our efforts and our voices just as much as any other person does. They deserve to go to school just like I do. They deserve to eat. They deserve to feel safe. They deserve to have adequate health care. Like, it scares me that people don't already think this, but it's necessary. And I will shout and stomp and yell till I'm heard. I owe it to them. I can't sit here and do nothing. I can't sit here and be silent, because that'd be an injustice to me, my family, and I know God's gonna ask me about it one day. I know he will, and and God is just, and I think that's why my family is so like steadfast. They're so they're faithful. They like it's kind of embarrassing. I'll text them and they're comforting me. Like they're so strong. They know God got them, whether it's in this life or the next. But even with that being said, we have to do our part and we have to act fast, because as the minutes go by, like these are lives. These are lives. This isn't just some country we see in the news. Like these are our homes. So I think just like humanizing the whole situation and encouraging everyone to do their part, even if it just means educating your own self, you know? A lot of the times when I tell people from Sudan, a lot of people don't even know what Sudan is, let alone that there's a conflict there. And I know like me being from Sudan, and if even if I wasn't from Sudan, but me being from Sudan, it's my responsibility. I have to if I have to be the voice for my family who doesn't have a voice, you know. And I'm an American citizen. Like sometimes that feels very useless, but I need to exercise my right, because they don't have those rights over there. They don't have the ability to contact their officials, their leaders, to help make change. They don't have that. And I feel like we take that for granted a lot here, but as sucky as it may seem here, we have rights and we have to exercise them. It cannot go in vain, because other people are dying because they don't have these rights, you know?
Noor, you are a very powerful voice for the Sudanese people. And I know your family and anyone listening is going to be proud that you are sitting here advocating and being a voice for them. You are amazing. This evening, you've been able to hear from people directly affected, because we believe learning from local voices is critical to understanding what's going on and how to respond, which will ultimately lead to lasting peace. Bryan, I know this is an area of passion for you. Can you share why the global community needs to include local Sudanese voices and perspectives in the discussion about the conflict and its resolution?
Yeah, I've had the privilege of working in the international development space, both from a policy standpoint and a programmatic standpoint, because real change, long-lasting change has to come from both a policy and an action standpoint. One of the biggest challenges I think that the international development community is faced with is that we're plagued by a very strict top-down diplomacy format, where we're not really always in a situation where we can work directly with those that are affected, but we're trying to look past governments that we might not recognize, or try to figure out how to solve problems, community problems, by dropping in food assistance or these very blanket approaches. And what really this means is that when decisions are being made on how to act, people who are living closest to the problem are not invited to the conversation. They're not able to contribute their perspectives and ideas on how to actually solve these challenges in a meaningful and sustainable way. And working with local leaders in a capacity similar to what Lift Up the Vulnerable is doing is a method to empower community members to develop their own solutions and own their own solutions. And that's really what's important, is people being able to say, this is the solution that works for me. It's the solution I believe in, and it's the solution that I am being empowered to carry out. And when community stakeholders are directly engaged in that manner, there's a greater likelihood for long-lasting change, because people actually believe in the solution that's being put into motion. James, in his video, spoke about how there's a need for resources to organizations and people. And a part of that, when we say resources, we have to understand that it's not always physical goods. Sometimes it's infrastructure, like repairing roads so we can actually transport food from one location to another, or capacity building of government officials in terms of, how to better manage finances, or working with people on the ground on how to develop sustainable farming techniques, so that way people aren't always relying on the food assistance that's coming to them, but people can figure out how to be self-sustaining or food sovereign for themselves, even when the rains wash out the roads that the trucks are traveling on to distribute the food assistance. And so really working with people to make sure that the people on the ground have the resources and the skills and the knowledge that they need to be the primary source that's creating this change and actually making sure that that change takes root in their communities is one of the most impactful and powerful ways that we can actually help establish peace.
Thank you, Bryan. That I think is exactly what we need. You know, let's hear again from Ezekiel in Sudan, and let's hear what gives him hope for the future.
Yeah, in fact, in my experience, actually, being a leader at our father's place, actually, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from daily experience, the one whatever I meet here, and I'm like a receptionist here. I meet every time I meet problems, I meet good things. But one of the things for our father's place to exist here actually is doing a very beautiful job. Even though we do it as it's small, but it's not small. It is actually playing a big role in the lives of the community of Sudan, and specifically in Noor Mountains. It has rescued children, and especially last year, within this war of 2023, it has actually, I learned a lot from the children because I was like confused. I didn't know what to do. Every child, everybody is coming and looking for food, and others for education. But again, well, children, actually, I managed to get them. Even Darfur, I didn't mention Darfur. Even war in Darfur, actually, the children who were affected for the war, the same 2 generals, and they had to walk from Darfur using the western side of the southwest of Nuba, that is Darfur, to cover. And then I had to get some few children, and others they could not get anywhere to get. And one of them is Muhammad, and it's a Darfurian boy of 12 or 13 years old boy. He decided to join the military in order to survive, to get food. But actually, the barracks guy, they kept him. And, as a soldier, yes, there, but they removed him from the barracks actually, and they shot him where we got him into our father's place school because he was young, and he ran away. He left. He didn't know where the parents. Some of them died. They walked. Even there are some girls, bigger girls. They walked from Darfur to Nuba Mountain actually to seek for provision. So we got some few of them, and one of them is Muhammad, who was a child soldier, and he's now, you cannot imagine how his life changed. So you can smile. He has never thought he will get home, and also some of the children who came from Sudan with their mothers. They left their parents. Some of them, their parents actually passed away, and they don't know where they are, others. But we managed. There was a woman who cried literally just to get a child because she doesn't have anything in her, nothing. She said, "Let me die, but keep the child alive." And that's where we brought for us the child with us. And we recruited the child with us. He's now doing very well, eating, is healthy, and is very happy. Likewise, in some other areas where there's conflict, also we had to get generally more like 52 children. Although we also faced some challenges of maybe getting more, but we didn't have enough space actually to accommodate all of them. But we tried our best actually to rescue last year 52. All in all, that actually gave me a big hope when I see children actually changing. see children, to see the glimpse of smiles in them, that actually bring up my spirit, and seeing that, and actually to give glory to God, and to appreciate many people who actually care for us, care for people of Nuba, care for our sufferings, and they want to see change, and the real change we have seen them. We have seen the change, and we have that hope. That's why I say I have hope that through these change makers, Sudan will change. Whoever we rescue will be the change makers, and this is my hope. If we build in these people, build the spirit of peace, love, and all this, they will be change makers. And this is what I speak it from down of my heart. And Sudan will change one day through these young children that today we are seeing, we are bringing them from far. I'm excited to have them smile, and even others, even to get all their support, to get their support from love. And they're actually giving big love for us and for our children, and even for our own people. And not only that, even we have some small project of agriculture. The small project of agriculture, it is far away from where we are. And when most of the women and the children came in, they didn't know where to go. But we go sometimes to our field to work and get some small wages that will help them actually to change their diets, to have something for the rest of the children. And at times you may think it is not doing anything, but it is actually changing the life of men or women. They testify that if it wasn't this one, I would have died, because I had nothing in my pocket, nothing for my family. But even with the little thing that we have given them as wages for what they have done for the year, it has actually changed the life of even the people who have fled from the war zone. I'm very happy and for everything that's been given to support me, to give me powers actually to support me. It is not easy. It has done a great impact. And through what they have done, actually, God has blessed us so much with this year. And we'll hear good news of what we will have this year. And I'm excited.
I love how he continued to say, I have hope. I have hope that children will smile again. Children will smile. It's powerful. Audrey, what more can be done to support the people of Sudan?
Thanks, Jennifer. I am so inspired by this conversation. I appreciate everyone that's joined to participate, and especially leaders like James and Ezekiel, who in the very midst of hardship are seeing and maybe even holding on with all they have to that hope that grows through interventions for those who are most vulnerable. As Noor said, it's make this scenario, make this war human. Realize it's not just numbers, but it's little lives or big people's lives. There's stories behind the lives here. And working in war zones can feel really overwhelming. And, for the past 20 years, Love has kept our vision on two goals in doing this. In the short term, by protecting one life at a time. And then in the long term, in investing in generational transformation through these local change makers. It's, I again appreciate what Noor said. It's whoever's been in leadership for the past 20 years needs to step down. We need a paradigm shift. We need a shift. And it's then that I believe that we, like James and Ezekiel and the many lives that they represent, will see lasting peace for both their countries. Everyone has the opportunity to make meaningful action or take a meaningful action locally that can impact lives globally. And so a few ideas to start. Learn more and stay engaged. International news is very hard to come by if you are a US citizen, but it's not non-existent. One thing I do is I add a Google alert for news specifically on Sudan to be delivered directly to my inbox. So I get daily, or you can set it up for weekly updates on what's happening in both countries, because there is news out there. So you can dive deeper into the issues and the needs and know how to pray and know how to respond. You can follow Lift Up the Vulnerable on social media or subscribe to the blog if you don't already have that, to stay informed about ways that lives are being impacted and the stories behind the people that are being impacted in Sudan, South Sudan. I think critically, you must share what you've learned through this presentation or the links that we provided. We'll send a follow-up email to everyone that has registered, and you can get these links directly from there too to follow up. But share and pass it forward, because people aren't talking about what's going on in Sudan, and we need to make more and more people aware. And of course, you can participate in an awareness raising event. I'm going to add some links in the chat again, so you can follow more links, but help us raise awareness for what's happening. We have lots and lots of ideas. You can contact our office, and we're here to support you. I know anyone on this panel will also be happy to talk more and share ideas with you. One of the things that we're going to be hosting in February, Jennifer is on the University of Alabama's Human Rights Institute, and we're going to be hosting a virtual event where James Lawala will actually share more about his story of growing up in war-torn Sudan and being conscripted as a child soldier. So you can hear more about the lived experience of children who have been exploited during war, and we'll make that link available in the coming months. And of course, donating directly to trusted organizations. Resources are critical to make things happen. Lift Up the Vulnerable, is one of the ones that you can support, of course, in supporting critical work by working with local leaders who are making direct impacts in the villages where they are serving. Now through December 31st, every dollar given will be doubled due to a generous matching grant, so you can make your giving go further. Ultimately, above all, we wanted to have this repeat panel because we want you to turn your knowledge from tonight into a step of action for the people of Sudan. We're all committed with our lives, really, to help raise awareness and help see transformation take place. And so we invite you in the various ways that you feel led to tonight to join us in helping grow this movement. As Ezekiel shared, standing with the people is what gives them the courage to endure and hope for the future. When people know that there is a presence and a power behind them, prayer behind them, support behind them, they can endure what they're experiencing, and hopefully move beyond endurance to coming out through the other side.
Thank you, Audrey, for everything you've shared tonight, for everybody on this panel, and all that you've shared, your heart, your experiences, your knowledge, and please, everyone on here listening, please have the conversation with somebody tomorrow. Somebody tomorrow, go up and say, hey, I went to this panel. Do you know what's going on with Sudan? When we start having the conversation is when things start to change. Like Noor said, when you start realizing these are people. It's not just this place nowhere, Africa. These are people in Sudan that are dying every day, and they need you. They need all of us talking about them. Before we end for tonight, I do want to open up the floor for any questions you guys may have. We've got our 3 panelists that are available that can answer any questions you may have. I'm going to peek at the chat to see if I see anything. We've got people from all over the US. That makes me so happy. Feel free to raise your hand if you've got any questions too, or just unmute and we'll let you talk as I'm digging through. Okay. I think we did information overload today, a lot to process. So let me encourage all of you. If you've got questions down the line, reach out to any one of these people on this panel. Email Lift Up the Vulnerable. Reach out to me. Reach out to any one of us. We would love to answer any questions and support you as you are deciding how this affects you going forward. I don't think you could hear tonight's voices and not be moved to do whatever that something is. You know, I'm a big believer the only way we change the world is if we all listen to that tug in our heart and we do something. What is that tug telling you to do, and do that? It doesn't always have to be money. It can be actions. It can be words. It can be anything, but do something. That's how we make the world better. Before we wrap up, Audrey, could you pray us out for this wonderful evening?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, God, that you are always, always, always with those that are suffering, that you are always, always, always in the midst of hard places with brokenhearted people. And may we be bold enough to join you there. May we be brave enough and compassionate enough to be a part of what you're doing, to see and participate in lives transformed. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, guys. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Some of us will hang around a little afterwards if you wanted to ask a question a little bit after everybody logs off, but we'll be here till 8 o'clock, and we appreciate your time, your attention, and your heart today. Thank you.